Okay, so have you ever thought about building the tech that, actually runs the world? I've been digging into this whole software architect thing, and wow, there is a lot to unpack.
Yeah, you weren't kidding about a lot. It's kind of impressive how much info you handed me.
Right, that's why I'm so glad you're here to help me break it all down. So, I started with these definitions of what a software architect is. They're the ones turning these big ideas into, actual tech blueprints.
That's a really good way to put it. They don't just randomly write code. They're thinking about the whole system, almost like, I don't know if this is too obvious, but like an architect designs a building.
No, that makes total sense. So it's less about knowing every single coding language and more about seeing how all the pieces fit together.
Exactly. They're thinking about things like, can this system handle a sudden influx of users? Is the data secure? Can other developers easily understand and work with the code base?
Gotcha. So it's about building something that's both functional and secure, and also something that other people can actually use and maintain.
Yes. And something else I noticed going through these materials, a lot of it talks about cloud computing, cybersecurity, things like that.
Oh yeah, I saw that too. Are those some of the specializations you mentioned?
Yep. These aren't just random buzzwords or anything. These are like whole areas of expertise within software architecture.
So it's not just one size fits all. I'm a software architect. There are all these different paths you could take.
Exactly. Like take cloud architects, for example. They're super in demand right now because so many companies are moving their systems to the cloud.
Makes sense. Everything's going digital these days, but I'm guessing it's not as easy as just copy pasting everything over to the cloud, right?
Definitely not. There are a lot of challenges that come with it, like avoiding vendor lock-in. That's where a company becomes too reliant on one specific cloud provider, which can be risky in the long run.
So cloud architects need to make sure the system is flexible enough to work across different providers or even move to a new one if needed.
Right. They need to think long-term, not just what works right now, but what will still be working 5, 10 years down the line. And that's just one example. Cybersecurity is another huge area.
Yeah, especially with all the headlines about data breaches and hacking these days.
Exactly. Cybersecurity architects, they're the ones responsible for making sure those systems are secure, but also easy for people to actually use.
It sounds like a constant game of cat and mouse, trying to stay one step ahead of the bad guys. So with all these demanding specializations, what's the payoff? What are the pros and cons of being a software architect?
Well, to be honest, the earning potential is a big one. Software architects are highly valued, and that's reflected in their salaries.
Who doesn't love a good salary bump? But I'm guessing it's not just about the money, right? What else did you find?
Oh, definitely not. A lot of what I read talked about intellectually stimulating work, always learning new things, that kind of thing. Plus, there's the whole challenge of designing these complex systems that actually work.
Okay, that does sound kind of cool. But this wouldn't be a deep dive if we didn't also talk about the potential downsides, right? I'm seeing long hours, high pressure, maybe even burnout. Is that something you saw too?
Yeah, definitely. It's not a 9 to 5 job, that's for sure. There can be tight deadlines, unexpected problems, a lot of pressure to stay ahead of the curve in a field that changes so quickly.
So it's like most things in life, there are trade-offs. But it seems like for the right person, someone who really geeks out on technology and problem solving, the rewards might outweigh the challenges.
I'd say so, yeah.
Okay, let's say someone is listening to this and they're totally hooked. They're ready to dive into the world of software architecture. What does that career path even look like? What are the typical stages they might go through?
Well, they might start as a junior architect, working on smaller parts of a larger project, learning from more experienced team members.
So it's like an apprenticeship, getting your hands dirty and learning the ropes from the ground up.
Yeah, exactly. And then as they gain experience and expertise, they might move into a full-fledged software architect role, leading projects, making those big design decisions.
Okay, so they've climbed a few rungs on the ladder. What comes next? What happens when they've conquered the world of software architecture?
That's when things get really interesting. For those who want even more responsibility, who want to lead at a higher level, there are roles like senior software architect or even principal software architect.
Ooh, now we're talking senior software architect. That sounds impressive. What does that actually look like day to day?
Senior software architects are like the ones setting the technical strategy for their whole team or even the whole department.
So they're not just designing systems anymore, but thinking about how all those systems connect and work together.
Yeah, they've got to see the big picture, spot potential problems before they happen, and make sure their team's work actually helps the organization reach its goals.
I bet that takes a ton of collaboration, not just within their own team, but with other teams, stakeholders, clients, everyone, right?
Oh, absolutely. Communication is key at that level. You got to be able to explain super technical stuff in a way that everyone understands, even if they don't have a tech background.
So they're like translators between the tech world and the business world, making sure everyone's speaking the same language.
That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
And because they're dealing with these large-scale systems, senior architects need to be experts in, like, managing risk.
Right, because one wrong decision could cascade and cause problems throughout the entire system.
Exactly. Like, they might have to decide between a solution that's more secure but maybe a little slower, or one that's faster but potentially riskier. Tough calls.
Yeah, no pressure, right?
Yeah.
But really, it sounds like they need a deep understanding of both the technical stuff and the business side of things.
You got it. It's not just about writing elegant code at that point. It's understanding how that code impacts the business, how it affects the bottom line.
So it's like they're running their own mini business within the larger company.
Pretty much. And speaking of those tough decisions and long hours, what makes it all worthwhile? I mean, besides the impressive job title, of course.
And the paycheck, probably not too shabby either.
True. But really, I think for a lot of senior architects, it's that satisfaction of seeing their vision become reality, knowing they built something that's actually making a difference.
Like a mobile app that helps people manage a chronic illness or something that connects millions of users around the world.
Yeah, stuff like that. Plus, there's the constant learning, the chance to work with the latest technology, the challenge of solving problems most people wouldn't even know where to begin.
Sounds like you need a certain personality type to really thrive in that kind of environment.
For sure, you got to be someone who loves a challenge, who's always wanting to learn and grow. Now, we were talking about principal software architects before. They're a whole other level.
Okay, lay it on me. What makes a principal architect so special?
Think of them as the technical leaders for the whole organization. They're the ones setting the overall vision for the tech, making sure it aligns with the company's goals, and that it'll last for the long haul.
So they're not just thinking about the next project, they're thinking 5, 10, 20 years down the line.
Exactly. They need to be visionaries, anticipating future trends, making those strategic calls to keep the company ahead of the game. They're the ones who probably saw cloud computing coming way before everyone else.
And had to convince everyone else it was a good idea. I bet that takes some serious people skills on top of all the technical know-how.
Oh, totally. They got to be master communicators, build consensus, manage expectations, get everyone on board.
So they're like the Steve Jobs of software, but instead of designing cool gadgets, they're building the invisible systems that power our digital lives.
Exactly. And speaking of all those skills, let's talk about what it actually takes to become a software architect. What are we looking at in terms of skills and qualifications?
Yeah, where do you even begin with something like that?
Well, like with a lot of tech careers, it usually starts with a strong foundation in software development. You've got to be good with at least one programming language, understand different architectural patterns, have some experience building software systems from the ground up.
Okay, so it's more than just being able to write code. It's about designing those systems to be scalable, maintainable, secure, all that good stuff.
You got it. And since the tech world changes so fast, you got to be a lifelong learner, constantly keeping up with the latest and greatest.
Definitely sounds like a job for someone who's passionate and dedicated, always up for a challenge.
That's the spirit. But for those who are cut out for it, it can be a super rewarding field, both personally and professionally.
Okay, but let's be real. A lot of people get freaked out by interviews, especially for these super technical roles. And I'm looking at these sample software architect interview questions, and wow, some of these are tough.
Oh yeah, interviewing for a software architect role, that's a whole other beast.
So how can someone really prepare for these interviews and show they've got the right stuff?
That is the million-dollar question. And the good news is, all the research you gave me, it's got some really solid advice. One of the biggest things is having a strong portfolio of your past projects.
So don't just tell them about your skills, show them. Like, here's a complex system I built. Here's how it works.
Exactly. They want to see you in action, not just hear you talk a big game. They want to know about the problems you solved, the decisions you made, what the outcome was.
So it's not just showing off your tech skills. It's also those soft skills. Problem solving, communication, teamwork.
100%. Those soft skills are huge in these interviews.
Like being able to explain something super technical in a way that my grandma could understand it.
Exactly. Because ultimately you're building systems for people, right?
Yeah.
So being able to communicate clearly with everyone, techie or not, that's critical.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture. So it's not enough to just be a coding whiz. You got to be well-rounded, a good communicator, problem solver, team player.
You nailed it. Another thing that came up a lot in the research was being able to talk about your design philosophy.
Design philosophy. Okay, that sounds kind of intimidating. What does that even mean in this context? So where were we? Oh yeah, design philosophy. It still sounds kind of deep to me.
It can sound like that, but it's not as complicated as it sounds. Think of it like this. They want to know you've got reasons behind your choices, that you're not just following the latest trends.
Okay, so like being able to say, I usually prioritize security in my designs, even if it means sacrificing a little bit of speed because protecting user data is super important to me. Something like that.
Perfect example. You've got to think about those trade-offs, right? Another architect might be laser focused on scalability because they're building something that needs to handle tons of users. There's no single right answer. It's about understanding the context of the project.
Gotcha. So it's less about having some grand philosophy written down and more about explaining your thought process.
Exactly. Now, looking at these interview questions you give me, some are super broad, like design a system for X, and then some are laser focused on one specific thing.
Yeah, it's a pretty wide range.
It's on purpose.
Yeah.
The broad ones, test if you can think big picture, break a problem down, then build it back up. The specific ones, those are to make sure you actually know your stuff.
Like, if I say I know the solid principles, they might grill me on one of them and how it relates to software architecture.
Exactly. They might ask about the single responsibility principle, which says each part of a system should only do one thing. It keeps things organized and easier to maintain, especially as the system grows.
So, like, you wouldn't want your electrician also trying to fix your leaky faucet, right?
Huh. Exactly. Each part with a specific job. Those principles sound abstract, but they make a real difference in how software gets built.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do you even get ready for such a random mix of questions? Do you have to just know everything?
That's the thing you don't. It's more about showing them you can think on your feet, solve a problem, and learn new things. Those are the skills they're really looking for.
So even if I don't have every single answer memorized, it's okay to talk through my thought process, how I'd figure it out.
100%.
Hmm,
A good interviewer would rather see that than someone who spits out a memorized answer but can't actually think for themselves.
that's good to know, because some of these questions really do feel like brain teasers.
Think of it like training for a marathon,
Yeah,
right? You wouldn't just show up and expect to run 26 miles without practicing.
very true. I'd probably collapse after the first mile.
Exactly. And just like in a marathon, pace yourself. During the interview, it's totally okay to take a minute to think, ask for clarification, even say, I'm not 100% sure, but here's how I'd start tackling that.
Okay, that makes me feel a lot better. So it's not about knowing everything, it's about showing how you think and how you learn.
You got it. And don't forget, it's a two-way street. This is your chance to see if they're a good fit for you.
Oh, yeah, good point. Don't be afraid to ask them questions too, right? About the company culture, the team, all that good stuff.
Exactly. The more you know, the better decision you can make.
This whole conversation has been so helpful. We've covered so much ground, from what a software architect even is to how to rock those interviews.
And we've only just scratched the surface. But that's what makes this field so interesting, right? Always something new to learn.
Exactly. So for all you listeners out there, if you're ready to take the plunge, check out those resources we talked about, try some coding challenges, and whatever you do, don't stop learning.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
You are the future of tech.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the world of software architecture. Until next time, keep those creative sparks flying.